Hi everybody, back to algebra again. Today we're going to learn how to factor trinomials that are in the form of what we call ax squared plus bx plus c, where the a is greater than 1. Okay, and we're talking about factoring trinomials where you cannot factor out a greatest common factor and still have that a is greater than 1. Okay, so just a reminder, we're looking for two numbers and that multiply to actually a times c. And you may not know it, but you've been doing that, and we'll go back and look at that in just a minute. And those two numbers have to add to b. Now I'm using those letters A, B, and C because they are going to become important in some of our future lessons. You have to be able to pick out the coefficient A, coefficient B, and the constant C. Okay, so this is really what you've been doing. And here are some examples up here at the top. These just happen to have some greatest common factors that we could factor out first. So I factored out the 2. And notice where that 2 is. And when you give a final answer in factored form, that 2 needs to be there. Over here we had a greatest common factor of 4. And again, you have to have that 4 in your answer because it's part of the original equation. Okay, so let's take a look at how we're going to do this. I told you we're looking for two numbers just like you were up here. Up here we found the 4 and the negative 3. And so we're looking for two numbers in 2x squared plus 5x plus 3 that multiply to a times c, and a times c is at 2 times 3, which equals 6. And then we're looking for two numbers that will add to this 5. Okay, so we start out looking at our pairs, 1 and 6, 2 and 3. And so those are the only factors that multiply to 6. That are whole numbers. Okay, so what we want is we want them to add to 5. Okay, and since this is all addition, we're looking for positive numbers, and so the 2 and the 3 are what we're looking for. Okay, so there's our pair, just like we would have done up here. All right, so let's see how we're going to factor that. How are we going to use that 2 and 3? We're going to start by rewriting the problem. We're going to take the original problem, the first term, 2x squared, and we're going to add, we're going to split this 5x up into 2x plus 3x, and then we're going to put on the c. So now we have 4 terms, which is what you worked on last week, factoring 4 terms by grouping. And so let's group, okay? And now we're going to factor out the common factors in each of those groups. So it looks like we can divide out a 2x. Okay, so when I divide these two, I end up with an x, plus, if I divide 2x by 2x, I get 1. And now we're going to go over here and we're going to factor out a positive 3, so plus 3. Divide that 3 out, you get x plus, and 3 divided by 3 is 1. And there we have those two same factors inside the parentheses, just like we did before. And here we have the other factor. So it's 2x plus 3 times x plus 1. And again, it doesn't matter which order you write those in, it's the same answer. Okay, so you actually have been doing that all along. It's just that up here, the 1 times the c is the c. So it was still 1 times negative 12 is still negative 12. And then in the middle, this one actually had a 1. Okay, so you actually were doing that before, just didn't know it. Okay, let's try that again. Let's take a look at example 3. All right, and so let's start out with A and C. So here's A and here's C. So A times C equals negative 24, because that's a negative 4. And then our B is a negative 5. So we're looking for numbers that multiply to negative 24 and add to negative 5. So if I start out with 1 and 24, nah. 2 and 12, can't get a 5. 3 and 8, 3 and 8 sound pretty good. So 3 and 8, I could subtract those and get a 5. Okay, and so I need a negative 5. So if I add a negative 8 and a positive 3, I get the negative 5. Okay, so let's start our factoring. We start with the same first term, 6y squared. And now we're going to do a plus 3y minus 8y. So we've split that negative 5 into 3 minus 8y minus 4. Okay, so we always keep the first and the last terms. Okay, now we're going to group. Okay, and let's divide out common factors. So it looks like the first one is divisible by 3y. That's their common factor. Divide these two and you get 2y plus 3y divided by 3y is 1. Okay, we're going to divide out a common factor over here. We're going to divide out a negative 4. They both have a negative 4 in common. So when I divide negative 8y by negative 4, I get a positive 2y. And negative 4 divided by negative 4 is positive 1. Okay, so then we have those matching pair in parentheses. And now we just need to rewrite our factors. So I've got 3y minus 4 and 2y plus 1. So we have factored this polynomial. Now, one question that I can think of is, how do I know if I'm going to write that 3 first or that negative 8 first? Or if up here I should have written the 3 first or the 2 first? Well, it doesn't really matter. Okay, it will all end up the same answer in the end. Okay, so just let me prove that over here. How about if I switch these two? Okay, just to prove it. 6y squared, and I'll put the minus 8y first, and then plus 3y. So I just switched places with those two in the middle. Okay, now we're going to factor that. Well, it looks like we can divide out a 2y. So I'm going to have a 3y left minus 4. And over here, they don't have anything in common. Well, all they have in common is a 1. So I'm going to put plus 1. So I'm going to factor that out. And that would be 3y minus 4. So we still have that 3y minus 4 as one of our factors and the 2y plus 1 as the other factor. So you can see it doesn't matter which order you put these in the middle, it will still work out. Okay, why don't you pause your video right now and go over here and do these two examples just to practice that on your own, because we're going to add in a little bit at the bottom. Okay, we're back now, and I will post the answers to these examples over here on my e-board tomorrow. So let's see what we need to do here. It says, look for the greatest common factor first, then factor the remaining trinomial. You know, that's really the first thing that you should do every time you start to factor a polynomial. You should look and see, is there a common factor I could divide out of those? Nope, nope. But down here it's a yes, and you really want to do that because that makes the number smaller, and it's really much easier to do. Okay, so in the first one, we have a greatest common factor of 5, it looks like. And so we're going to divide 5 out. And remember that 5 is not going to go away. It's part of our original equation, so we'll save that till the end. So we divide out a 5, we have 2k squared plus 15k plus 7. So now this is our new trinomial that we are going to factor. All right, so we're looking for two numbers that multiply to a times c, so 2 times 7, that would be 14, and add to b, which is the 15. Okay, so I start with 1 and 14. That sounds pretty good, so let's just try 1 and 14 and see if that works. Okay, so really we're working with this trinomial now. So I am going to factor it, 2k squared, keep the first term, plus 1k, plus 14k, and keep the last term, 7. Okay, so now we can group and divide out our common factor. Looks like it's going to be a k. So I have 2k plus 1 plus, that looks like we can divide out a 7. So we have 2k plus 1. That's good. And so our factors are k plus 7 times 2k plus 1. And don't forget to bring down your 5 so that if we multiplied this all back out, we would get back to the original problem. Okay, so just really that one extra step in there, finding a greatest common factor. Okay, and the last one we're going to do is number 9. And looks like we can divide out probably a 3. Greatest common factor is 3. So let's divide that out, put it over here. We've got 5y squared minus 6y minus 8. Okay, so there's our new trinomial that we are going to factor. And our a times c would be a negative 40. And our b is a negative 6. Okay, so let's see. Let's start with 1 and 40, 2 and 20, 3 doesn't work, 4 and 10. 4 and 10 has promises, so let's start with that. Okay, so I wanted to add to a negative 6, and so that would have to be a negative 10. All right, so let's go down and factor this trinomial here. So let's start with 5y squared, and we're going to do a plus 4y, a minus 10y, and go back up and pick up that minus 8, and factor by grouping. Okay, looks like we have a greatest common factor of just y, so that's 5y plus 4. These two have a negative 2 in common, so minus 2. Divide negative 10 and negative 2, you get a positive 5y. Divide negative 8 and negative 2, you get a positive 4. That's looking pretty good right there. So our two factors are y minus 2 times 5y plus 4. And don't forget to bring down that greatest common factor that goes on the outside. And that's how we are going to factor polynomials, trinomials actually, with an a that is greater than 1.